Playing fantasy with IDPs is just different. The biggest difference? It's the size of the edge you can get by simply preparing better than your league mates. We're talking through not only our IDP rankings on this show, but how to treat them in your draft. And we're going to hit sleepers from every position as we go. Guys that the rest of your league, probably not even thinking about. An all new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schauf and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com here to talk IDP rankings. And Shane, there are lots of things that you've brought to the staff, but one of the things I personally appreciate the most is I don't have to just talk to myself about these things anymore. It's nice to have another person be like, oh yeah, I also play IDPs. I have some opinions on these. But before we get to those opinions, everybody's probably a little hot right now. How hot is it for you where you are?
Pittsburgh here, we're hitting the 95-degree mark over these next 3 days. So it's pretty toasty. I'll say I've been trying to stay inside.
Yeah, that was my plan as well. But inside decided to start working against me over the weekend when our air conditioner decided to stop spitting out cold air. So as we speak, I'm under the deadline of making sure we get this in before the air conditioner person might show up. Of course, they always operate in 3-hour windows, so we might be up against it, or I might have a great big cushion. Either way, it's a sweaty time up here in upstate New York at the moment.
Yeah. I'm glad you're at least in your basement, a little bit cooled off, but I was hoping we just get the full drenched sweat of Matt. Would have been fun for this pod.
Yeah, I don't think you want to see the version of me that would be sitting upstairs doing this, but whatever we look like on here, you are here to find out about the IDP rankings, to get some help probably drafting your IDP rosters. And that's what we're going to focus on here. I think, Shane, for me at least, IDP rankings and the IDP projections are different than the offensive side. The biggest difference is on offense, we have this robust draft market, and especially now with all the best ball drafting. By the time we get to, late spring, early summer, and then certainly to prime draft season, there's been a lot of drafting. There's been a lot of market shaping. We know where players are generally going. And it's not that we use that market to set our offensive projections, but it's certainly part of the equation, figuring out where you need to target guys. And there's at least some anchoring, like, yeah, this guy belongs in this range, and then we'll figure out exactly where we have him within that range. Or, it might even be some players that we like dramatically more or less than the market does. There's still no worthwhile ADP for defensive players, and especially early in draft season. Like maybe by the time you get to August, there might be some usable ADP, but it also doesn't do a whole lot for helping us set our rankings and know what players cost heading into drafts. So for me, that means a different exercise in setting the rankings. And it also means a different way to use the rankings. It's more about the tiers, where they split, how big each tier is, than it is about specifically ordering the players. And it's also more for me about finding mispriced guys. Like that's always part of fantasy, but I think it's a more distinct advantage in IDP right now because there are true sleepers at this point. There are guys that, the market just doesn't see coming, or people have no idea what their role is going to be like, or what kind of production that guy is capable of within that role that we do know about.
I'm with you. I think if we ever have a guy mispriced offensively, there's 75 pieces on the internet, and that price, that market changes very quickly on that offensive player. You can have IDPs that are way, way off in terms of market versus what they actually will do, and no one ever adjusts or even thinks about it. And that just gives you another advantage that you can have in those IDP drafts. There's not a ton of information out there still on the internet about IDPs. So if you have and know these tiers, I think it really gives you an advantage and, allows you to pick up values and stack the offensive side of your roster while building up the defense as that value falls.
And where you're drafting matters. The specific site on which you're drafting, the draft room in which you're drafting, that lack of ADP means great variability in how those players are listed within the draft rooms. You might get a site that has, guys basically ordered in last year's scoring order. You might have something closer to alphabetic. You might have something that's a total guess for where these players belong. So if you can find like a few target players in your rankings ahead of the draft, locate them in your draft list as you get started, before you get started, ideally, and then just like have them queued or even just be aware of them as you go, can be a real advantage over league mates that are, more slaves to that draft room in which you're drafting. The draft war room, of course, is also going to help you figure out when the IDP drafting should start, because that can be a tough thing to figure out by league, and it's going to differ quite a bit by league. That's the other component here is IDP scoring varies quite a bit more league to league than the offensive side does right now. So the draft war room is going to have your specific format, going to have your scoring settings and your lineup settings imported in when you sync your team. And it's going to give you projections and rankings that are specific to your situation. And as you draft, we'll say, hey, now it makes sense to draft this guy. Then you put that together with the tiers. You can say, I'll go ahead and get this started because my whole league is undervaluing this position and I can go ahead and start with this stud at a good spot. Or you can say, I got 7 guys that are basically the same in value. So I'm going to watch my league start this. I'm going to wait another 2 or 3 rounds and I'm still going to get a guy that's basically the same value as that first player that was drafted. Getting this set and finding a good set of rankings and just being prepared is really going to give you a big advantage on the IDP side. So I think that's enough delaying before actually getting to the rankings that are in the headline. Let's jump into it. We'll go basically the top 10 at DL, LB, and DB as we go. Talk about some of the key names and maybe some sleepers beyond that range. Maybe some guys who should be in there who aren't right now, because this is all evolving as we get through the summer and learn more about the players and their situations. Defensive line rankings, top 10, currently on draftsharks.com, looking at points per game by our basic scoring model. Again, it's going to vary depending on your league, but these are some big names. Number 1, Micah Parsons. Then we've got Aiden Hutchinson, Will Anderson Jr., Andrew Van Ginkel, Derek Brown, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, and then Myles Garrett, DeForest Buckner, Brian Burns, Max Crosby, all basically tied. We'll get to them in a minute. Shane, for me, Parsons and Hutchinson are a pretty easy 1-2. I'm not saying they have to be 1-2 in everybody's rankings, but I don't think anybody's looking at IDP rankings and saying, why is Micah Parsons so high? Why is Aiden Hutchinson so high? Pretty self-explanatory. Both very young, very productive, ascending players. Behind them, I think Will Anderson Jr., there's a bit more risk to him just because he hasn't quite put it all together yet, especially last year was dealing with injuries. But I think he's really just a healthy season away from joining this potential top shelf of IDP producers.
And I always like when you have that elite player coming into the league, especially a pass rusher, and they show that talent, which I think Will Anderson did, all the traits that made him a potential number 1 overall pick when he came to the league, the first step, the explosion. I mean, it was all there for the Texans. We saw it on film in the NFL, beating offensive tackles. So to me, I think that tells you that he has the talent to be an ascending player, one of the best in the league. And I think it's worthy of the top 5 rankings. I think double-digit sacks are on the way for him with a healthy season.
Yeah, and the other thing that tells me that talent is there is he dominated right away in the SEC. Then the NFL picked him 3rd overall. Now he has produced through 2 seasons. So he's just been good. No reason to believe that he won't continue to be good. Andrew Van Ginkel is an interesting one because he was kind of this flash player for Miami for a while, then signed probably a bigger contract than anybody would have guessed with the Vikings, delivered big numbers last year. It's a bit flimsy because there's a lot of big play involved in that, but he also has been the kind of guy that can turn in big plays. So Andrew Van Ginkel is the kind of guy that I'm not trusting to be in the top shelf of IDP scorers, but if he slides within a certain draft, I'm going to grab him because he does have the ranging skill set that can put him up there really across formats.
He's the type of player I like to take in IDP leagues where the floor might be a little bit lower. We can trust TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, who probably in a lot of IDP drafts will get drafted ahead of Andrew Van Ginkel just for name value alone. But Van Ginkel has the upside, especially in tackle-heavy leagues, to get you a little more of those tackle numbers, plus have those flash plays. And if it doesn't work out, if he was kind of a flash in the pan for 2 seasons, I think it's a lot easier to replace that production on the waiver wire than it is on the offensive side. So I'd rather take that risk than just kind of play it safe, especially with defensive line and edge rushers.
Yeah, that's another great point. I think in all of these position groups in IDP, it's a lot easier to find a replacement if you draft a guy even high at the position and he just doesn't work out for you. TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, also kind of guys that speak for themselves at this point. Same with Myles Garrett. Now, it might seem like I have Myles Garrett low, Max Crosby low. They very well might move up, and depending on your format, they could already be higher. Like this basic scoring format that we're looking at right now does not include quarterback hits, does not include tackles for loss, but we do have projections in there for those things. They're just not that commonly used, so they don't go into our default scoring yet. So if you do play in a league that scores categories like that, those things are able to be factored in. They certainly will drive up players like Watt, like Garrett, like Max Crosby. So all these guys are good. All these guys are going to be in that upper range of defensive linemen for your draft. A sleeper just beyond that top 10 for me this season is Jeffrey Simmons. There are a few components that play into that for me, Shane. So Jeffrey Simmons has already been a good player. That's why he's on his second contract with the Titans. He's already making a whole bunch of money, but he's also just 28 right now. So he's squarely within what has historically been the prime range of a defensive lineman's career. He is in a kind of semi-contract year where he's signed with the Titans beyond this season, but the contract is worked out in a way where they could dump him after this season for a lot less dead money. And he kind of could look to renegotiate and get more money on what might be a final contract at that age. We've got the best shape of his life season reports on Jeffrey Simmons. You don't want to factor those in too much, but when you're talking about an already good player and it's like, yeah, he's streamlined a little bit. Okay, maybe he's ready to actually like fully realize his pass rushing potential and turn, his pressure stats into sacks this year more than he has in recent seasons. So I like that. Already been a productive rusher. Like I said, the sack numbers have been up and down, but he's been consistently able to get into the backfield. What I don't like is that the Titans, I don't think, have done a very good job of surrounding him with talent, but there is at least Tavondre Sweat going into his second season, the defensive tackle next to Simmons. He was the 38th overall pick last year. So clearly the Titans think that he's a good player. He's heading into his second year. Maybe that helps Simmons a bit up front with the blocking attention that he gets. But, just overall, it's more of a bet on Simmons' talent.
I like Simmons a lot. I think the bet on talent is absolutely the way to go when you start looking at sleepers, guys outside the top 10. I'm with you. Even those small factors, I think, kind of add up for him on a Titans team that I think all around is going to be better this season, and that should also benefit Simmons a bit.
You got any sleepers at D-line for us?
My D-line sleeper is Montez Sweat for the Chicago Bears. I like them bringing in Dennis Allen from the Saints. He was the head coach of the Saints and was fired because his system likes to use kind of that big defensive end, both as a pass rusher and to set the edge. Remember a couple years ago, Carl Granderson in 2023 is going to play the role that Montez Sweat is going to play in this defense, 8.5 sacks, 78 tackles. And I mean, Sweat hasn't come close to those tackle numbers, but he has had at least 5 sacks every season. So I think we continue to see the sack numbers are going to be there. And I think this system just could give Montez Sweat a little bit of an edge in terms of those tackle categories if that's a major setting in your IDP league.
And he's been a good enough player for us that flashes at times, played through some injury stuff last year, and they just spent money on Deo Odeyingbo in free agency. So maybe that draws a little attention away from Montez Sweat for drafters, makes Sweat stay on the board a little bit after a year where he didn't score quite as well. So yeah, I think he really could be a good value in our IDP drafts this year. Linebacker now. Here is the top 10 plus one, and you'll find out why in a minute. Number 1, Zaire Franklin, Roquan Smith right behind him, Zach Bond coming off his monster breakthrough season and then new contract with the Eagles. Deion Henley at number 4 for me, Edgerrin Cooper, Jordan Brooks, Robert Spillane, Caden Ellis, Logan Wilson, and then tied at 10th right now, looking at points per game, is Carson Schwesinger. Okay. He's going to challenge me all season, and I'm going to leave that in just to show the challenge that I'm dealing with. Carson Schwesinger and Fred Warner rounding out the top 10. First off, Shane, any surprises either within that top 11 or guys that are missing from that group?
I think the top 11 is pretty good. I think some people might think Carson Schwesinger, a rookie getting drafted in the second round, but it looks clear that he's tackling is his thing. He's a downhill player as a middle linebacker position. I love that you have him at 10. Probably the guy, I'm someone, especially with the linebacker position, I'll take the old reliable tackle guys. The Logan Wilsons, the Fred Warners always end up on my team. So I'm the guy that's still drafting Bobby Wagner. He'd still be in my top 10. He's never averaged less than 8 tackles per game over the last 10 years in a season. Despite being 35 years old, was probably the biggest downside. But he did it last year with Frankie Luvo there for the Commanders, and there's no reason to think Bobby Wagner will slow down. So he's probably the one guy I'd sneak in there somewhere, as I think those tackle numbers are just always consistent with him.
Yeah, don't be surprised if Bobby Wagner does move up toward this range, or if we wind up with tiers that include him with somebody like Jordan Brooks, because I certainly don't have a strong argument for Jordan Brooks over Bobby Wagner. We're kind of still in the range of the year where it's like set the projections, then we'll see how everything plays out over the next few months. Like at defensive line, I think Franklin and Smith are pretty obvious, top candidates. Exactly where you have them can differ, but they're near the top or at the top of the linebacker rankings. Zach Bond, if he had last season and then didn't get the huge contract extension from the Eagles like he did, then I might be a little more skeptical that he's a player who could fall off. But the Eagles, who have not spent money on linebackers for as long as I can remember, did pay up to keep him around. That tells me that they specifically like what he brings to the position, that he should be in the same role that helped him explode last year. Yeah, Jihad Campbell's going to be around. We'll see exactly what the other linebacker spot next to him looks like, but I don't see any reason to not expect Zach Bond to be heavily productive in his second year with Philadelphia.
I'm with you. I think the situation is what makes him still in that top five. If he had gone to free agency and signed elsewhere, I think we'd be a little more skeptical. Can that role really stay the same? But with the Eagles, we know what we saw, that they would not have paid up if they thought they could just replace him with somebody else or draft someone to just plug in that slot. And that means Bond, I think, is special for how this defense plays that role, that both is going to get sacks and tackles.
Deion Henley gave us the production that honestly I was expecting to come at some point this past season. Like, he entered the league as a player who had only pretty recently become a linebacker after heading into college as a safety. So still developing his linebacker instincts, but became a full-timer for the Chargers last year, delivered across categories, which is what we saw from him in college. I'm willing to go ahead and bet on him being a productive player over at least the next couple of years, and then we'll see what happens beyond that. Edgerrin Cooper is kind of the guy that I'm going out on a limb for this year, because he arrived last year as a second-round pick, then didn't play a whole lot early in the season, but saw that playing time ramp up late in the year, even sandwiching an injury. Like right after he had his breakout kind of game, then he missed several games with an injury. The Packers went right back to him. I expect him to lead that linebacker core this year. I think he's a better player than Quay Walker, who I thought was a questionable first-round pick when he entered the league, and I think he has remained just okay, if not worse than that. So I expect Cooper to pass Quay Walker this year, who is in his final year of his rookie contract. And Cooper arrived with that cross-category scoring potential that he flashed for us last year. If he scores anywhere close on a per-game basis to what he did, or per-snap basis, actually, because he didn't even get to totally full playing time last year, if he scores on a per snap basis this year, anywhere close to what he did in limited time late last season, he has upside all the way to the top of the position.
I had him penciled in as like my guy I'll talk about that didn't make the top 10. And then you gave me the top 10. He was 5. I was like, oh, someone else loves Edgerrin Cooper too. I love it. Like on film late last year, absolute monster. Just the range and the vision, the closing ability. He looks like one of the best linebackers in the NFL in that limited sample size. Ooh. So I'm with you. I'm really excited about Edgerrin Cooper, and I think a lot of IDP drafts are not going to have him as a top 5 linebacker. So I'll be scooping him up.
Yeah, it kind of first revealed itself to me, my feelings about him, I guess, when I did the projections and then looked at our dynasty rankings, and Edgerrin Cooper was at the top, and I was like, "Who?" Actually, I think I like that. So yeah, it's the year of Edgerrin Cooper around here on the IDP front. Carson Schwesinger, which why couldn't his parents just name him like Noah or Ian Schwesinger? That would have been much easier, but nevertheless, Carson Schwesinger arrives off of a huge stat season at UCLA, early second round pick, top of the second round for a team that we thought was going to be focused on quarterback and whatever else. Took a linebacker. I think he's going to be a full-timer right away and is going to deliver us stats right away. And I want to be in on him immediately.
And this is a Browns offense that might not be very good. So you could see them not scoring a ton of points and the other team running the football a lot. I think that's going to mean a lot of Carson Schwesinger, cleanup, garbage time, tackles, stats. He's definitely a hole plugger, vision and close. I think that's what they drafted him to be, just be in the middle of that defense. So I like it a lot. He's been a target in dynasty rookie drafts for me, and certainly will be in redrafts as well.
Fingers crossed that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is able to return from his neck injury, but that's certainly helping to play into the scoring upside for Schwesinger right now. My sleeper at linebacker at the moment, Divine Diablo in Atlanta, signed a 2-year, $14 million contract with the Falcons in free agency after his playing time fell off a little bit for the Raiders, but he was already a fine stat collector relative to playing time for the Raiders. Now he gets into a position that has propelled stat collection for mediocre to worse linebackers in recent seasons over multiple Atlanta coaching staffs. Shane, I really wish that this were Troy Anderson, but the Falcons' current coaching staff showed us last year that they don't want it to be Troy Anderson. So I got to move on to the guy that they're now paying $7 million a year, who's going to line up next to the non-traditional off-ball linebacker that is Caden Ellis, who rushes the passer a whole lot more than most stand-up linebackers.
I love Diabo in tackle heavy leagues because that's going to be his position. Like you said, it's just an ideal stat collecting position. So I love that. Mine, once again, I'm just going to go to the old guys that just collect stats for me is Nick Bolton for the Chiefs. We're never going to get the 180 combined tackles we got in 2022, but I think Bolton has a nice floor. We actually saw a little more pass rush from him last year that they used him on some stunts. He had 3 sacks, which was a career high. So it just, for me, especially if I have a deeper IDP league where I have some flexes where I want linebackers, Nick Bolton's that kind of guy that I'll draft and just every week can plug in and feel comfortable with the tackle numbers I'm getting.
I certainly like him more the more the tackles matter. He's going to be one I kind of have to see how I'm thinking about him, because I bought in on that huge tackle season and he's let me down relative to that since. So if he and I can meet and discuss things and figure out where we're at right now in terms of his fantasy upside, how healthy he can actually stay. I like that Kansas City gave him the big contract extension. I was waiting to see if he was actually going to move on. So the fact that they signed him instead of letting him walk, that made me think, all right, maybe I need to start liking Nick Bolton a little bit more than I have recently.
I'm here for the Matt and Nick kumbaya moment. I think we'll get that.
Yeah. If you have a linebacker or a defensive lineman or a DB that we're about to get to that you like, that we missed, somebody that should be inside the top 10 that we're screwing up on by not ranking them that high, let us know in the comments on YouTube or wherever you're taking in this podcast that you can leave a comment. We're certainly interested to see all of them. You could also hit Draft Shark subreddit and talk about IDPs there. Always happy to talk about IDPs really in any format. Defensive backs to close this one out. We've got Brian Branch up top. Not really a surprise after the way he started his career. Budda Baker behind him. Antoine Winfield Jr., Kevin Byard, Kyle Hamilton, Nick Cross, Jaquan Brisker, Derwin James, Tyler Nubin, and then a surprise that I'm not going to mention just yet. We're going to wait till we get to him. Shane, Brian Branch, his first season, he scored in a way that looked like he scored in a flimsy way. He gave us big plays that didn't match his playing time. So I was wondering if he was going to be that player that seemed like he was better by the numbers than he actually was in terms of reliably starting. Then his second season found him in a 100% playing time role, more of a safety, but still presenting both the tackle collection and big playability. So I think he's a pretty easy leader for the position at this point.
Absolutely. Last year kind of proved it. I think when you have that safety that plays in the nickel, I get worried if you're doing that too much. It's just not going to help those IDP numbers unless you're such a ball hawk that you can make those big plays. And we learned that Brian Branch can do that and be a player that gets a lot of tackles and forces fumbles. I mean, he just does everything so well. So I love him at the top.
Pretty similar case for Antoine Winfield Jr., who I think is going to be a value this year because he missed a lot of time with injuries last season. So that's going to push him down draft boards. Antoine Winfield Jr. still has the scoring upside to lead this position, and the kind of scoring upside where he could have a season where he's leading the position by a couple of points per game because he can rush the passer. He can make big plays in coverage. He moves around the formation. He can certainly make tackles, and he's in position where he will make tackles. He's not playing a ton of deep safety. So Winfield's probably going to be one of those guys that I'm targeting in my drafts. And I want to point out, because he's number 3 on our list, you can just take him as the 3rd defensive back in your draft. And I don't think that you're going to be disappointed, but you can also check him, see where he's sitting in your draft room. And if he's like the 20th defensive back in your player rankings on your site, then go ahead and wait on him and see, because even if you end up waiting a little too long, somebody else gets him. There are plenty of other safeties available, but that's where you can get some of that advantage is, sticking our number 3 safety in your pocket waiting and taking him as like the 12th defensive back in your draft, and then you've piled up some other player values in the meantime.
That's exactly the way to do it. Have that queue open, move those players in just to keep an eye on where they're going, how many DBs are going. Because Winfield, similar to defensive line, I mean, DB, I just like to swing for upside, and you can always pick someone up off the waiver wire if you need to. And Winfield's that guy where you get a baseline floor tackles, and then he's going to make a sack every once in a while. He's going to get an interception every once in a while and just have these insane games. So I love that. I'd probably, if he's like 20th in the draft room, I mean, I'd probably take him 10th through 12th as well and just feel good about the value.
Jaquan Brisker is going to be a risk this year. He only played in 5 games last year. He's got big concussion issues in his history. So he's the kind of player that I think is okay to just be totally out on this year. But if he is able to stay healthy, there's still significant scoring upside to him. So Shane, for me, he's the kind of guy that, like you were talking about earlier, I'm willing to go ahead and take the risk. And if it doesn't work out, I'm confident I can replace him off waivers.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I have him probably a little bit lower just due to that risk, but he has, I think, more upside than some of the guys outside of your top 10. I think a lot of the quote unquote ADPs in the draft rooms are going to have Jaquan Brisker in the basement, and he's going to end up as a value, even if I have him a little bit lower than we have in our rankings.
Nick Cross and Tyler Nubin both emerged last year after not being factors before. Nubin, of course, was a rookie, so not surprising that he didn't produce before last season, but he gave us good numbers immediately in a way that I'm going to go ahead and believe in year 2. Not to say he's definitely a stud, but feel pretty comfortable with him up in this range. What do you make of Nick Cross, though, coming out of nowhere as a tackle collector for last year's Colts?
I think the athleticism just really translated last year. And, we'll see how this Colts team kind of shifts with Lou Anarumo taking over as defensive coordinator. I think might change things a little bit, but he likes to use some of that single high safety and let there be a freelancer. And Nick Cross is going to play that role. So I think it'll end up pretty similar to last year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a little step back on those tackle numbers. Might be a little bit fake, but he'd still be in my top 10.
Yeah, certainly can't be sure that this year is going to be exactly the same tackle-wise for Nick Cross, but I felt pretty good keeping him up there and betting that something along those lines happens, especially because the safety that they added was somebody who played deep for the Minnesota Vikings before signing with the Colts. The guy that I didn't mention the first time around is Kamren Kinchens for the Rams. Had some of that scary high production last year, 4 interceptions and limited playing time for the Rams, had a 103-yard return for a touchdown. So pumped up his fantasy numbers with some of those big plays that we can't count on, but also was a pretty good tackle collector in that limited playing time. He looks like he's in position to get full playing time this year as a true starter for these Rams. And he was a big play guy in college, including 11 interceptions over his final 2 seasons.
I love it. I think he's worth a top 10 DB pick. We talk about on the offensive side, tight ends take a little while to progress often. I think safety is like that too. I mean, we even saw with Brian Branch, right? That second year is really where you can explode. So guys like Tyler Nubin and Kamren Kinchens, I think they're going to get better, get more playing time. And Kinchens not only has the tackle ability, but his just ball skills and vision. You're not going to get a 103-yard return. It's fluky, but I do think he's a player that has the ball skills in coverage to make some of those bigger plays and give you a splash week here or there with an interception or an interception return if you get points for return yardage or anything like that.
So we'll be watching to see what happens with Kamren Kinchens this year. Shane, any sleepers for you that we haven't talked about at DB yet?
Well, being the resident dynasty rookie guy, I got to go with a rookie upside play for my sleeper. I'm going with Nick Emanwuri, the safety for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, DB, I'm just swinging for the fences. Is the most athletic safety prospect of all time. He's probably going to be behind Julian Love and Kobe Bryant to start, but I think if Emanwuri gets enough snaps, he has the range and ability to be not only a tackle machine, but in coverage, I think could do some excellent things with the football in his hands, returning interceptions or whatever. So he's a guy that I'm going to draft fairly late in IDP drafts. And then if he does start, someone I can plug in. If nothing's happening, I can cut him. It's pretty easy. Like, give me even worry and let me just swing for that upside.
I'll take even a step beyond that and say he's the kind of guy that if I see somebody else draft him in my IDP drafts and be like, crap, I should have gone ahead and taken him around earlier. I want to talk about him on every single IDP pod. So I'm glad that you put him on your list. Really, he'd probably be higher in our rankings right now, except for that uncertainty about what his position looks like immediately. I love the long-term stuff, and he might be up close to, if not in this range, by the time we get to August. So I'm waiting to see exactly what Seattle's plans are, but I'm excited. As anybody who's watched our shows before on IDPs knows, I also am going to throw out a young guy, not quite a rookie, but was a rookie last year, Damani Richardson in the Panthers defensive backfield. Now, the ESPN depth chart lists Nick Scott as the other starter at safety right now ahead of Richardson. And I have honestly absolutely no idea why, because Nick Scott is 30 years old. He was with the Panthers last year. He started just 4 games, did basically nothing. Then they re-signed him, but for less than $1.5 million on a 1-year deal. It doesn't even look like any of that is guaranteed. So I see no indication that the Panthers are going to start Nick Scott this year. I think that listing right now is going to make Richardson an even deeper sleeper than he should be, because Richardson, as an undrafted rookie last season, started 5 games, moved around the formation. He played in the box, in the slot, played deep safety, racked up tackles across those games. You know, we'll see what he's got in the other stat categories, but he should again be playing behind an iffy set of linebackers in a weak defense for Carolina. So I think there will be opportunities. And I don't think that he's going to be on a whole lot of radar. So I think he's going to be the kind of guy that we can draft at the very end of IDP drafts, who could easily be a top 15 guy by the end of the season.
I love the pick. I don't even know if Nick Scott makes the team. I don't think he's even guaranteed that, let alone be the starter. So I love it.
Well, I like to end it on that kind of agreement. So you can go out right now and draft Nick Emanwari. Go ahead and draft Damani Richardson. And obviously, if you have IDP drafts going on right now, you're a very serious player. So you're our kind of people. If you want to see which IDP targets make the most sense for your team in your draft, in your specific format, there's really only one way to do it. That is by syncing your team at draftsharks.com. You import your specific scoring and lineup settings. You get a draft war room specific to your setup. Take players who leave quizzical looks on the faces of your league mates, like the DBs we just talked about, and the other sleepers at the other positions. You end up grabbing this year's Zach Bond and looking like a genius by the end of the year. If you're an IDP player, then Draft Sharks is your unfair advantage.